the EV station. And so I'll keep talking. All good? I'll keep talking. Yeah. Okay. So I was an early adopter at council, saying that we need to be leaders in accepting and acknowledging that EV vehicles are going to be something in the future that residents are likely to be using and transitioning to. And how do we support them to do that? And so we've installed EV charge stations in Burwood Village, which is actually in Camberwell off Toorak Road, which is part of the Lynden ward that I represent. They have been installed now for approximately 6 months, and they've gone from having very few users to almost at capacity now on a daily basis. So that tells you that people know the charge stations are there, they're using them, and they're appreciating them. Other initiatives within council, I advocate very strongly that all refurbishments and all new builds must include solar panels on the roof, must support electric energy rather than gas. And I know there's one project that's a little bit in conjecture at the moment, and that's the Kew Recreation Centre, but that one is under contract, and that's something that it's very difficult to have influence over that. But certainly all future projects since the Kew Rec, council are very strong on now looking at the maximum ability to make it as sustainable as possible. So that's considered with the tender documents and obviously with our budget. Now, with the 3 questions, do I think council should play a more significant leadership role in community when it comes to climate change? Absolutely. I've served on the EV committee, Electrify Boroondara committee. I've served on the Climate Action Committee. I'm very much involved within sustainability. I do all I can to promote, not just to council and councillors, but to our community, the benefits of engaging with forums, workshops, seminars, attending sustainability information sessions to try and help educate as best we can how our community can transition into a low energy household. What new initiatives would you propose to include in council next climate action plan? Look, I'd largely be guided by the community. So we're going through a community consultation at the moment that will be finalised when the new council is formed later this year and into 2025. So the community consultation is actually encouraging community to participate and say what is important to you, and areas of the environment, of climate action. I'm really interested to see what that feedback is, and I'll certainly be guided by that. With regard to community engagement, again, because we are going through the 2025 to 35 community plan, we're already proactive on that front. We're having multiple phases of community engagement, whether it be workshops, pop-up forums in activity centres, online surveys, and also anyone that approaches councillors or council officers. From my perspective, I can say I will always guarantee that I will respond. And if for whatever reason I don't, it's certainly not intentional, but it could be that there's been some communication issue. My commitment to supporting climate-friendly initiatives within my own house, we have double insulated as we renew windows. They are double glazed. We have a 1930s English Revival heritage protected home, but we are working within the footprint of the house and what we can do within the house to ensure that we're reducing energy costs. I currently am not the beneficiary of having solar panels, but I do personally subscribe to REN Energy for green energy. And I've actually just got an electricity bill that I'm looking at the moment that's come in today. It's actually costing me on average $500 more per year to support green energy, but until my house can become self-sufficient, it's important to me that I do that as a commitment to doing all I can to protect the environment. How am I going for time?
Because we only have one candidate in this ward, we're not going to be strict on that time limit. So if you have more to say, please do.
Look, I certainly support more community representatives such as Lighter Footprint, such as Electrify Boroondara, been involved on the Climate Action Advisory Committee. And I think it's important that we have non-council members on that, or non-councillor members on that, because Lighter Footprints are leading the agenda. And I know I'm here at a forum tonight talking about my candidacy for election, but even if we weren't here tonight talking about council elections, I've had a strong appreciation and affiliation with Lighter Footprints for a long period of time. You do amazing work. And Lynn, when you spoke earlier about that vacant chair in 2022 at the Hawthorn Town Hall, I was there. I can tell you, I tried to reach out to that party as a Lynden Ward councillor, saying I'm hearing from the community that the party is not seen to be proactive in recognising the seriousness of climate issues, of climate emergencies, and it concerned me that the party was silent. I received some very unsettling comments to the point where I chose not to invest my time anymore trying to liaise with the party because they weren't willing to listen. And I think sadly we see here tonight, there are no Liberal members here in attendance. And I think to the best of my ability or my knowledge, I've only seen one Liberal candidate registered to attend, and that's Anthony Nichols, who's a candidate for the Mailing Ward. So I'm incredibly disappointed because this is not about party politics. This is not about individuals. This is about what's doing right for our community and for Victoria and for Australia and for, you know, the common good. So look, I'm happy to take questions and I'll answer as openly and honestly as I can.
Thank you very much, Lisa. I'm looking at the chat box for the questions. Melissa has asked, would you support a community battery project?
Absolutely. We have talked about it at council level and at officer level. It's a matter of identifying the appropriate location, obviously identifying if there's any potential risk to the immediate community. It's an area that, well, as we're all aware, it hasn't been done in Boroondara yet, but it's something that I would wholeheartedly support research, investigation and implementation of.
Thanks, Lisa. Are there other questions? I invite members in this Lynden Ward to go to the chat box and write a question. It'll appear on the screen and Lisa will be able and willing to answer those questions. In the meantime, I have a question. It's not directly about climate. Should the council perform citizenship ceremonies on Australia Day?
That's a challenging one because I did participate in the Boroondara reconciliation commentary and I did provide answers and responses. And look, I won't talk about my personal perspective, but I'll talk about it from a community perspective. I've attended the Boroondara citizenship ceremonies on Australia Day since I was first elected into council. It's always the highest attended citizenship ceremony, to the point where a lot of people that want or are waiting to be naturalised actually defer it until Australia Day because they say to them it has greater meaning to become an Australian citizen on Australia Day. So whether or not Australia Day was transitioned to another day, would it have the same significance to them? Highly likely. But at this stage, everyone I've spoken to have actually said that to them it's particularly important on that date. So it's a controversial issue and I will be guided by federal, state and community views on that. And as an elected representative, I never bring my own personal view into the chamber. I always represent what I believe is the collective voice of the community.
David, sorry, David has written, I assume that you support the electrification of the council fleet. How would you work to expedite this within the current climate emergency?
I've had numerous conversations with council officers that specialise in sustainability about this, and we've talked about it routinely at the Climate Action Advisory Committee. There will be an incremental introduction into electric vehicles. There's already some smaller sedans that employees are using where they don't travel a lot or use a lot of power. The problem we've got more is the transition into, for example, the waste collection vehicles, and how do you make sure that they have enough battery charge to go and do the waste collection run? Even with the light commercial vehicles, do we have enough in place to ensure that they can be on the road when they need to be on the road without being delayed for 2 or 3 or 4 hours, you know, getting that full charge or fast charge? So we are rolling out the free phase charge units at all of council headquarters, you know, whether it be the Hawthorn Town Hall or the Civic Centre in Camberwell or Kew or Hawthorn or wherever the facilities are. And we are preparing to transition. We're looking at the fleet renewal, we're looking at the lease renewal, and it's something that is a high priority. But we have to be mindful that for the heavier vehicles that are crucial to be on the road for the time they need to be on the road, that there's not going to be any disruption to service. But I have actually seen buses, electric buses in Boroondara now, which is wonderful. So from my perspective, if a bus can do it, hopefully it won't be long before council vehicles can do it.
Thanks, Lisa. Melissa has written, what are your methods for hearing the community voice?
Personally, I encourage everyone to call me on the phone. I will always welcome a conversation, and even if I'm not able to talk when someone reaches out to me, I will schedule a time as soon as possible that's convenient for both parties. I'm happy to meet in person. I have a lot of meetings, whether it be in a small meeting room at council or at a cafe, or through email. I'm happy to engage in dialogue, and if I'm not able to give the answer, I'm happy to say, can you please give me a little bit of time and I'll get back to you. My personal preference is face-to-face. I think face-to-face engagement is more productive, and particularly if we can get officers that have expertise in the subject matter we're talking about to join in that conversation, it then becomes something that is a united position, not just myself and a resident or myself and an organisation, but it's also someone that has expert knowledge in that particular field.
Peter has written, is there a problem installing solar panels in heritage listed houses? That's signed by Katrina.
Yep. Look, from my perspective, I'm aware of perhaps 2 in the Lynden ward that haven't necessarily been able to realise the outcome that they've desired. But in all situations, there is opportunity. If you're in a heritage overlay precinct, the only condition is you cannot install solar panels if your home is contributory or significant, and if it's deemed to be compromising the heritage precinct. But that's only the front facade. So it's 1/4 of your roof line, to put it in very simple terms. So you can always put solar panels on either side boundary or rear boundary. You can put solar panels on detached buildings such as garages or carports, or even if the carport is attached to the house, providing it's not visible from the very front facade. I think I would say in all situations, there are ways that you can make solar work. Even on a heritage overlay, in a heritage protected home.
Thanks, Lisa. I invite members and citizens who are watching this to keep the questions going. Please go to the chat box and type in your question. While those questions are coming, Lisa, could I tell you of a story that happened here 2 weeks ago, not in Lynden ward, my own ward of Maranoa, two
Right.
houses down on 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning. A gang of chainsaw people arrived and went up a very large tree and started chopping at the branches. The tree, as far as I know, well, it's a very large fir tree. It's around about 12 metres tall. It qualifies as a canopy tree. I went and spoke to the tree loppers and asked them if they had a permit, and I got sort of vague grunts of, well, yeah, kind of. Obviously they didn't. And a little while later, the owner arrived of the house. It's a rented house. And I pointed to him that he said, the house is going to be demolished. And he said that the tree was in the way. In other words, he's going to move the house frontage forward of the tree. I pointed out to him that ignorance of the law was absolutely no defence at all. Could you please tell me what is the, and in the meantime, I rang the council. Now, there was a problem there that the council operator did not have access to the database. Now, the database would have said, had this person applied for a permit, then would have all known. But the person who answered the phone at the weekend didn't have access to that database, which I thought was a real flaw. My question is, what is the penalty for lopping down a canopy tree? And do you think that penalty is sufficient? And is there a process whereby the penalty could be improved by a factor of 10?
Yeah, thank you. Look, it's a subject matter very dear to my heart, and I know myself, I've witnessed a white van pull up with no marking on it, where men have got out with chainsaws and started to endeavour to cut down a tree. I've called it out. I've rang the after hours numbers, but I'll also say, as a councillor, I am advantaged to have mobile numbers of directors and managers, which I know, the general community don't have access to. So in the situation, I actually did get through just to the after hours number. The person I spoke to, and they are an external organisation that, typically take after hours calls, so they don't have access to the full database. You're absolutely correct. But what they should be doing is referring it to the local laws officer, and the local laws do work 7 days a week, and they have someone on call, so to speak, that can go to a site, and if there's breach of a local law, which includes illegal tree removal, they can go to that site and they can actually cease works and tell people to down tools, and they have access to the information that they need to check whether or not there's a valid permit for any tree removal. Look, it's rare. In some situations, there are actual permits where the tree may have been diseased, or there's, a particular problem where it's unstable. But the local laws officers can track if there is a permit for that. So I just recommend, if anyone's in that situation and they call the after hours number, ask that local laws officers be sent out immediately to that site. Again, with myself as ward councillor, and some of you would be aware of that, my mobile's always on 7 days a week, and I often say to people, I'm a night owl. If anything even happens, after 5 or 6 o'clock, if you call me on my council mobile phone, and particularly if you leave a message and say this is urgent, I will endeavour to get back to you, unless there's some reason why I'm in a meeting where my phone's on silent. I always respond calls regardless of what day of the week it is. And if something's brought to my attention, if the after hours number has failed, I will ring the director or the manager myself and say, you need to attend to this. So getting back to the penalties and consequences, council have lobbied, well, when I say council, Boroondara Council, myself included, have lobbied with the various state ministers over many years, because the penalty for illegal tree removal is actually set by the state government. And we have been saying, and it was $2,000. And we've been saying for many, many years, this is ridiculous, particularly as we're seeing this behaviour where people have no appreciation or respect for trees. It's just they want to moonscape the block and they want to build the biggest property they can build. And even if they're going to receive a fine, they say, who cares, bring it on, because, you know, for $2,000, it's pittance. So we've been lobbying very hard with the new Local Government Act. We've managed to get an increase in the penalty point structure. So we've been able to increase the rate from 2,000 to 4,000, but we've also further enhanced the ability for council to have multiple offences and to hold multiple people to account. So, for example, the property owner, potentially the actual developer that's been employed by the property owner, and the company that's illegally removing a tree without a permit. So all of a sudden, $4,000 becomes $8,000, $12,000, potentially $6,000. That is starting to resonate now and have an impact. It doesn't save the tree, but it does hold people to account. We're also working very closely with the state to say, can we, with planning permits, put in a virtual tree? So if someone illegally moves a tree so that they can bring their proposed dwelling 2 or 3 metres forward to increase the footprint of the built form, if we get approval through the state planning system to have a virtual tree there, we can actually, whether it's through council or through private building surveyors, we can actually say, no, you illegally remove that tree. As a consequence, you can still not build where that tree was. You have to replant a similar species tree or a canopy tree, and so they don't win. You know, they don't get the ability to build on the full dimension of the block. But in saying that, we're dealing with the state government at the moment of proposed planning reforms where they're actually wanting to ramp up the ability to maximise what people or developers can build on site. They're actually talking about reducing the private open space and reducing the onus on the owner or developer to put canopy tree or vegetation. And we're strongly objecting to that in council. We're putting in submissions to the state government. We're very, very concerned about the proposed planning reforms, as is the majority of our community, and they've been very vocal on that as well. So we're actually trying to increase tree canopy planting as a minimum requirement on a site, you know, as at least 1 or 2, whereas the state are basically saying that to increase what they would say the need for housing, they're sacrificing any vegetation, and that's always wrong.
Thanks, Lisa. Lisa, I'm reading from the chat box, and Trevor has written, it's more of a comment. We are in a heritage area and had to cancel solar panels at the last minute when we became aware of the restrictions. Only a small proportion of our roof at the rear of our house is not visible from the street, and it is shaded by a tree. So solar panels are very limited.
Yeah, and look, Trevor, I'm wondering if you're on a corner allotment. There are, you know, some situations where there is the exception to the rule, and whether or not, as I said before, you have an outbuilding like a garage or a carport where you could potentially put solar on that. You can't. I can see you shaking your head. Okay. It's something that council officers are very happy to have a one-on-one meeting and talk to you to see if there's any opportunities. So, as I said, there's 2 that I'm aware of in the 7+ years I've been a councillor that have been more challenging than others, but in both situations we found a way. So please reach out to me, and I'll put you in contact with one of our officers and we'll see what can be done. Okay.
Thanks, Lisa. David has written, I recently attended a lecture by Greg Moore on the urban forest. He stated that for heat mitigation and optimal health benefits, cities should have a minimum of 30% canopy coverage. Are you aware of the coverage in Boroondara and what is council doing to increase our canopy percentage?
Yeah, so we've just implemented a new tree canopy policy just a few weeks back in the chamber. It's online. We also introduced and adopted a biodiversity policy. We're increasing our tree planting every year. We've made a commitment that we're going from example, 1,800 to in excess of 2,000 trees. And we're trying to identify other areas we can do more. The biggest concern we've got at the moment is we as council are doing more, and most residents that care about environment and care about canopy and sustainability and the prevention of heat island, most of us are doing what's right. But sadly, there's a huge percentage of people or developers that just care about maximising the livable, habitable space they can get onto parcels of land, and there's no concern at all about tree canopy. Now, some years back, the state government gave us an assurance that they would insist that there be a minimum of 30% of permeable space on properties, so that would support appropriate levels of planting. The recent reforms that we've just found out about in August and September, the state are now saying that they're actually reducing that to maximise what can be built on parcels of land. And we actually had a very engaged council meeting last night where we talked about a submission that we've put to the state government with regard to the proposed reforms. One of the biggest issues is that why is the state government working in silos? So we've got the Premier and we've got the Minister for Planning ramping up mass production, and yet we're not hearing from the Minister for Climate. And so all the correspondence that Boroondara are sending to the ministers, we're actually now saying this needs to be shared with all of the politicians, all of the ministers within the current party that's representing Victoria, and they all need to take responsibility. And you can't have one party saying we're doing, one minister saying we're doing everything for climate, and then the Minister for Planning to say we're going to maximise what can be built on projects. It's condescending, it's contradicting, it just doesn't make sense. So I actually asked, there was a lady representing Lighter Footprints at council last night, and I think her name was Jenny Smithers. Does that sound right? Yeah, and she spoke very well, and we were all very complimentary of all the amazing work Lighter Footprints do. But the question was asked, is Lily D'Ambrose aware of what the planning department are imposing and proposing? And they're saying that they're going to put forward their recommendations in December. So we have not got a lot of time to have a community consultation or the ability to have a voice. Considering we're in caretaker period, it's very difficult to hold meetings. And the new council won't be formed until mid-November, but the state government are wanting to propose these planning reforms in December. So if there's anything that Lighter Footprints can do to reach out to Lily and say, please help us, because they are contradictions. You can't have 30% of permeable space with the ability to have meaningful vegetation, but then you're also increasing the footprint of what's allowed to be built on a site. It's down to 10%. So in answer to David's question, the state are now saying that 10% of permeable space seems to be an acceptable level compared to 30%. It's alarming, yeah.
Lynn has written, have you considered shaming signs where trees have been illegally removed? They do this in the beach areas.
Good point. We have talked about it. We're seeking, legal advice on it, because there is a lot of legislation there that sadly protects perpetrators through privacy laws. But what we're wanting to do is even more than that, and be able to actually put it on the Boroondara website and actually identify the property address and the person responsible for the illegal removal of a tree. And it's something through doing our tree canopy strategy that's been adopted. that's something that we are pursuing, awaiting advice on, and hopefully we'll be able to implement that again once the new council's formed come mid-November. So I agree, name and shame, absolutely. And not just the property owner, but whoever the developer is, whoever the illegal tree person is, you know, just expose it all.
Lisa, maybe this may be the final question, in the sense of there's nothing much going in the chat box further. Is homelessness a problem in Boroondara? And if so, what can council do about it?
Right. Look, I think it is a problem everywhere, but at the moment, I'm not hearing as much as I was through COVID. I think in COVID, because people were contained into the states that they were when the lockdowns hit, we saw more people, particularly through the winter months, that were homeless, and it was a very difficult time. And council did what they could, and I'll be mindful that it is ratepayers' funds, but we did support all those in need during that time within the level of what council's remit is to do. And part of that would have been referrals to Salvation Army or Salvo Care. We also have Cam Care, which certainly help with food and some access at times to temporary shelter and showers and hygiene, etc., etc. And there are other organisations within Boroondara, for example, Servants Community Housing, they're amazing. At the moment, it's not as bad, or it's not as prevalent as what it was during COVID, but it will always be an issue. We do have third-party authorities that we have good referral services with, that if council identifies someone that's in urgent need, we will always refer someone to come and talk to them and try and provide support to them.
Yeah. Lynn, are you getting a sense of conclusion?
Well, we did have another question in the chat from
sorry,
Trevor.
this one just appeared, yes. I'll read it. The state, David's written this, the state level response re trees is disappointing. I know there are areas of public land that could have many more trees, e.g. along some of the bike trails, anniversary trail and the like, plus some ovals. Could the city increase trees there to partially offset the buildings on private blocks?
Absolutely. That's our focus at the moment, because of knowing what the state's objectives are. It's going to fall on public land and potentially VicTrack land, which is another area we're exploring at the moment as well. So we're wanting to talk to them. Up until now, VicTrack have not allowed council to plant trees on their land, because they would say because there's a rail line there between a residential fence and the train tracks, it's perceived to be dangerous, and that VicTrack are responsible, or Metro partners. So we're trying to tap into that space to see if we can partner with them to do more planting, because not only will it provide extra vegetation, it'll help combat graffiti, because as everyone would be aware, where there are rail corridors and fence lines that are very visible, that's where you'll see the graffiti. So if we can get commission or partnership with these external authorities, third-party authorities, to engage in more tree planting and canopy cover, that'll be a win-win for everyone, including, combat graffiti. We are planting more trees on council sites. We're actually currently looking at areas where there's the capacity to put more, and also different species of plant in the event that, there is a disease to one species, that we've got other species there that will be sustainable. And obviously ones that can be heat tolerant as well, particularly looking at climate issues. Sorry, I'm just reading that question. Bike trails, anniversary trail, we're working with the state to try and actually increase also funding to do more bike trails. We're very supportive of the Box Hill to Hawthorn anniversary or cycle trail corridor. We're Northeast Link currently doing the mega freeway. A lot of Boroondara's land on North Bourne is very sadly been seconded to support that,
Yes.
and for very minimal compensation, if any. And so not only is that encroaching on land, but it's actually removing a lot of tree canopy. And we're working as quickly as we can to identify the areas that won't be impacted by the expansion of the freeway footprint, where we can start planting there to start putting in vegetation. But the dilemma is, while they've got construction going on, it's not just where the freeway is going to be built, but they've also taken over land for all of their storage equipment and excavation equipment, and we can't plant there until that's removed. So it's going to be a multi-year project, but we are starting to work in those areas and along freeway, commercial corridors, bike trails, absolutely. Yep. Any decreased erosion onto the lines?
Not any, and.
Oh, sorry.
And.
Sorry, what does it,
So
any,
the reference is that by planting trees in the
Mhm.
railway corridors, there will be
Right.
decreased erosion onto the railway lines.
yes, yeah, good point, absolutely, and I'll convey that to our sustainability team as another point of advocacy when we're talking to them. One other problem we do have is along our Back Creek reserves through Boroondara, and there's some in Lynden ward, where Melbourne Water are responsible for the drainage runoff or the creek maintenance, but Boroondara are responsible for the walking tracks that are along those walking corridors. We actually are experiencing some erosion at the moment in the Lynden ward between the Riversdale Road and Cornell Street, and we've actually had to close off that for that very reason, that as trees have become unstable and they've fallen, and the root systems have caused erosion of the embankments, it does actually create an issue where the paths are no longer stable. So we're actually working with Melbourne Water at the moment and council to partnership how we can reinstate some of these walkways so that they can be open to the public again.
Lisa, I'm feeling a sense of conclusion.
Well, wait a second, Peter, there's another question that we've skipped over.
Is there? Where?
I think so.
Is
Are there any new / creative increased housing alternatives that Boroondara can suggest to big government that would fit with our locality? So I guess this is about the need to increase housing availability.
It's certainly not the Boroondara Council, and I don't think Boroondara community are anti housing renewal and increasing housing to accommodate whether it's individuals, couples, families, or whatever the need may be. I think the concern at the moment with the proposed planning reforms is they're targeting areas that don't have the appropriate infrastructure to accommodate the magnitude of what's proposed. So council would certainly want to work with state government and the community to identify areas where housing can be sustained and infrastructure's in place. And with regard to vegetation, look, in a lot of situations, it would actually be better to increase in height so that you could actually have some permeable land left where you can actually sustain planting. But the dilemma we've got is a lot of the developments at the moment have underground basement for car parking, which means that canopy trees don't have the ability for their root system to go down and be viable or sustainable in that situation. So we would hope whoever is designing the developments would consider that and come to council with applications for multi-dwelling developments and say, we've identified a design that can be the best of both, including sustainable design as well.
Thanks, Lisa. Lynn, I couldn't see that last question.
I'm not sure why, but so it goes. Lisa, I've got a question. What is the story with that Hawthorne and to Box Hill bike track that's doesn't seem to,
yeah,
we've been talking about that for like 15 years or something.
Yeah, council have put in multiple submissions and proposals in support of it. But I think at the moment the state are just saying they've got no funding to commit to it, and not even to partner with it. So they're not even saying if individual councils that overlap on their boundaries, you know, for example, whether it be Whitehorse and Boroondara, would the individual councils be in a situation to contribute funds supported by the state to contribute funds? Those conversations aren't happening. We're leading them, we're just not getting any response. Also with the anniversary trail continuation over Toorak Road to help support bike and pedestrian safety, the state have had that submission. Boroondara Council have done the concepts, the full designs, the costings. We've gone to state and federal, and no one has come back and said that they've been able to include it in the budget. They all agree it's very important, but they have other priority projects at the moment, and sadly it's not within Boroondara. So we advocate multiple times a year. We meet with every elected representative, regardless of what political party. You know, we've actually even spoken to a federal member, Monique Ryan, and she agrees as well. It's a very, very important project, but she has not been in a situation where she can help support contributor funding. The Labor Party is certainly not contributing to it. And of course, Liberal at the moment is in opposition. So, you know, they don't have the funds to contribute. It'd be lovely to have a beneficiary, but at this stage, there's nothing. And with rate cost, it's a significant amount of money to put in budget. To do it 4 or 5 years back, pre-COVID, would have cost around 12 to 13,000. Now it's probably sitting on at least 12 to 13 million. Now it's sitting on probably about 20 million. It's a lot of money, but it's certainly on our priority list to keep advocating for, because we know it's important to the community, as is with the Box Hill to Hawthorn Trail.
Ask one more question. What's your view about what should happen to that Vic Roads site in Kew?
Look, agree it should be what I call affordable housing. Might be a different interpretation to the state might call affordable housing. What the state is saying is affordable housing or social housing is approximately 10% of the development that would be available at roughly 10% of the retail cost or the commercial cost. That's still a huge price tag for people, particularly vulnerable members of our community, to be in a situation where they could afford to buy or even to rent those properties. I'd like to see more contribution go into the affordability of those apartments, and it should be at least 20%, not 10%, and it should be at least 20% more affordable, not 10%. But I agree the site should be developed for apartment living accommodation, but it needs to have adequate open space. It needs to facilitate getting back to shared paths, bike paths, like an anniversary trail that can go through it. It's been identified through Denmark Street that there is the capacity to link to existing cycle networks. And we're saying to the state that there is the capacity to deliver on housing, open space and shared path all within that site to connect it all together, because a lot of people will prefer to use passive transport as opposed to on road transport, and we should be supporting, well, we should be encouraging and supporting that.
Thank you.
Lynn, are there questions on your screen that I can't see?
I'm scrolling through here. I can't see any other questions, but are there any other questions from people in the room? We don't want to lose Lisa early if we have anything else that people want to know about or have a question. We did have one more question that we had in our possible questions to ask, which was, do you have one particular thing that drives you nuts about our current council that you would like to fix?
Yes. Status quo. I feel some members on council are fixed in positions and they're not prepared to evolve as society evolves or as needs evolve or as climate issues arise and evolve. And when there are some that are locked into the mindset of how it used to be 10, 20, 30 years ago, that's not recognising our current climate. And when I say current climate, I'm not just talking about climate as in climate action, but our demographic, our needs, our structures, how do we cater to the voice of our community? We have to be open, we have to be listening, we have to allow people to be heard, we have to represent the voice of community, and we have to be seen as leading the agenda, not impeding the agenda. So, and I mean that in the most positive way, that we have to be somewhat progressive. My philosophy has always been, even before I was on council, respect the past to prosper in the future. So we have to respect our heritage, we have to respect our forebears and what they have brought to our community, but we have to adapt to support the future. And I believe we can do both by appreciating what Boroondara is, what it represents, and it has always been the ground thickly shaded. It's always been renowned for its tree canopy, you know, for its beautiful open parks and gardens and diversity and inclusion. And, you know, some of the original built form heritage is quite magnificent. And what's proposed with the state's reform at the moment, with the 800-metre catchment around the epicentre of the Camberwell Junction, potentially is to erode into heritage precincts. That concerns me. I think we can do both. I think we can appreciate and honour our past, but we have the capacity where we've got the ability to further develop areas that have the potential to develop, and we can do it well and we can do it responsibly, and we can include amenity that supports our community. There's a balance, I suppose, is what I'm saying.
Thank you. Wonderful. Peter, do you want to wrap up? I don't see
Yes,
any further questions in the chat.
I think there are no further questions. Lisa, I'd like to say thank you very much for coming along tonight. We've enjoyed listening to you. We value your experience, and thank you very much for attending. That brings the I'd like to say good luck, Lisa, in your election attempt. That brings to an end the 2024 Candidates Forum, and thank everyone for their attendance, for their questions and for their interest. To leave, there's a button on the bottom right-hand side, and if you click that, you'll be leaving the meeting. Again, thank you to everyone, and thank you to Light of Footprints for organising this forum.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And anyone listening, please never hesitate to call me on my council mobile. As I said, I'm always approachable. And anyone that's spoken to me in the past will know that. And Light of Footprints, you are amazing. Thank you for all that you do. We are very, very fortunate to have you representing the Boroondara community. All the best. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Lee.
Good night.
Good night.